Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? It's Tuesday morning. Um, things have been going well in the cafe. It's been exciting. I keep meeting jazz people from around the region. Uh, I don't say this to sound egotistical or any way, because I mean the collection is what was my teacher. But I'm surprised how many jazz musicians I meet, how kind of limited their scope is of certain parts of the jazz canon or great swaths of the jazz canon. Uh, Trombonist came in, and aside from a few Dixieland bone players, Teagarden and such, he had a hard time really naming a lot of the great bone players from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and even like the Lawrence Browns and the Al Grays and some of those cats he wasn't too familiar with. Didn't seem like I didn't press too hard, but it kind of seems to be a recurring theme in the jazz heads I meet. People are very niche in the jazz they love, and it's not just the avant-garde people and the free jazz people. It's also the Dixieland people. It's also some of the swing fans. This guy came in yesterday, super excited, just floated around the room. But his knowledge and his passion was very Woody Herman. And I have lots of Woody Herman, and we talked a lot. And, of course, Woody Herman and Stan Kenton had those great orchestras that produced so many amazing players who made great recordings on their own. The Stu Williamsons, the Charlie Marianos. It's a long list of guys. The Shorty Rogers, Claude Williamson, Stan Levy. It's the whole list of characters. It's a pretty common reoccurring theme, though, I'm finding, is that the knowledge that we share on this channel is a much wider swath of harvesting jazz and history than where most people's focus tends to lie. And so I guess we're fortunate in that matter. Again, it's not, I say this with great humility, it's not me being the great teacher here. It's the collection itself that's also kept me a student. And I think I've never really lost that aspect of what I do, is I've always been the student. I've always been taught by the music and the records and the labels and the history are just layers that you have to lay on top. It wasn't like I didn't know history and all of a sudden I just started thinking about, civil rights. I was always aware of civil rights and the movements that happened and the wars and all the history was always part of my DNA. And so it was with that structure that I was able to cross-hatch the collection to the DNA of our history. And again, I say it with humility. It's not some great realization on my part or some incredible knowledge base that I have. The knowledge base is the records themselves. These collections, these discographies, the chronologies, and then the history that overlaps it. We're kind of lucky and fortunate that my OCD pushed me to collect these vast discographies of sometimes 500, 600 records by some of these labels. And some of the labels are 4, 5, 6 titles. But when you fill all those gaps in, I looked at this site online, this Burka Jazz site. It used to be a store somewhere on the East Coast. And the guy did some fairly extensive little background stories on a lot of the different labels. And it was a site I used to reference a lot years ago. But there was a lot of gaps in my knowledge till those times. And now having looked at it again yesterday while I was, during some slow times, I was like, man, I know almost all these labels, all these records, and honestly, my discography is more extensive than what this guy has on his site. All to say, it's a cool resource if you want to learn some more about the little labels and the big labels. And he did a lot of work compiling a lot of that information. And it's a valuable resource, the Burka Jazz Archive or something like that it's called. But yeah, it just kind of drove home to me that most of the people who come in here who are considered experts on jazz in their region, in their local municipality, in terms of the local players and the vernacular. They're seen as jazz aficionados. And it turns out most people have a fairly narrow scope of what the jazz kingdom looks like. So as I was saying, I had a customer walk in. Turned out to be the mayor of our fair little city of Elgin. He seemed very impressed. And of course, we're bringing people in from an hour, 2 hours away, plus the locals. And that's great for the city. And, you know, the average coffee shop's not going to bring people in from St. Paul or Owatonna or La Crosse. But because we have the music as well, it's bringing that extra element here. Well, as I was saying before, it's cool to realize just how much broader an understanding of the jazz canon, the people that are part of this channel, we get to swim in deep waters. We talk about a lot of interesting subjects and a lot of interesting labels and a lot of interesting history. We cover pretty much the body of the jazz age. You know, we don't talk much post-70 very often. Once in a while we'll delve into that. But I think that's covered fairly well elsewhere. But it wasn't something I thought there'd be a lot more people that had a much broader sense of jazz, especially for people who consider themselves jazz people. But it's quite shocking to me how many jazz people have come in so far whose knowledge and scope has been fairly niche and fairly limited. And so I guess cheers to us, you know what I mean? Cheers to us for helping to widen that knowledge and understanding. And I think this channel has done a good job of doing that. And I think this music collection has been a wonderful resource for us to all grow as music lovers and listeners, especially of jazz. And like I said, it's been my education without any qualms or hesitations, I'll say that. What I want to dive into real quick is the interesting way songs evolve in the jazz canon, and how we've talked about certain songs and how they played and were done by many people within the jazz world. But certain songs, I think, are hard to almost appreciate until you know their vocal pop version of them. And I think it's easy to lose scope on, for example, John Coltrane when he does Nature Boy. I first heard Nature Boy on this record, which is number 2050 in my collection of 14,000. I used to put these stickers on my records, and the stickers would tell me the artist, the label, the name of the record, and then 65-0-2050 was an indicator of the year it was made, and then what number was in my collection. And I did this up until about 9 or 10,000, and then I just kind of lost track and stopped doing it. I had notebooks filled with all my records. But Nature Boy was a song I heard on here many times. Didn't really understand its context, and you kind of short yourself when you do that. So I'm trying to make this episode in between customers coming in. It's been a busy morning. Probably should have done this yesterday. I had the quietest morning we've had probably the first 3 hours. But so Nature Boy. I knew it through Coltrane, but I didn't know the song. And that gives you a small part of the story. And when you're missing the melody, you don't really appreciate or understand when Coltrane starts to state the melody. And you really have to appreciate it. Get to know Bobby Darin's version of Nature Boy. And it's a beautiful song. It's something that I've played at gigs over the years, and elderly folk, 50 plus, what a great voice Bobby Darin has. They would come up to me like, oh, I remember this song. Who is it? What is this? It's such an exciting piece. And there's a reason why Coltrane latched onto it. It's a memorable melody. And memorable melody is part of the purpose of music. You know, that's what we're looking for, is a hook, something that draws us in. And so hearing these lovely chords and that wonderful, rich voice of his, There's a slight Arabic tinge to it as it lilts along. And so to hear Coltrane embody this, but reinvent it, this gives that meaning. And they do stake the melodies at times. The greatest thing you will ever learn. We're going to stop it there because I don't want the censors to take this down. Then we'll restart it. Is just to love and be loved in return. Gorgeous. Nice string ensemble. I think this came out on Atco for Bobby Darin initially. And I love a lot of Bobby Darin's works. But Nature Boy really jumped off the page when I heard it the first time. And I'll be honest, it took me a minute to connect the Coltrane to the Bobby Darin. And it's honestly a song that's been done a lot in the jazz canon. And I was listening to some fun Miles Davis the other day, Blue Moods. This is on the debut label, a label kind of set up by Mingus and Max Roach to put other musicians' music out that was less corporate and less oversight by non-musicians. And lo and behold, what do they start this off with? But a wonderful version of Nature Boy. And you have the great Teddy Charles on the vibes, who states most of the melody here for us. I also thought it was weird that Blue Moods had such a yellow-green cover. You'd think a blue cover would have been more appropriate. Although I do think I have seen a bluer version of this. So, Nature Boy, in its many iterations, that's part of the magic of jazz, is to reinvent a song, to borrow a melody, but then to extrapolate on it. And so I've often said it before, and I'll say it again. If you want to really appreciate jazz versions of material, get to know the original songs. Beautiful. Miles at his minimal best. It's a bit of a hidden treasure, this record. And he's working with people he doesn't really work with very often. Charlie Mingus, Elvin Jones, Teddy Charles, as I said, and then Britt Woodman. And, I mean, it's just a beautiful, beautiful version of this song. The Britt Woodman trombone on this is wonderful and haunting with a dark melody. It's really quite something. And so Nature Boy, great song. Bobby Darin kills it. And I must have probably 10 jazz versions of that song at least. I didn't look it up. I mean, I could have Google searched it and I found probably 10 more versions of it easily. I hear it all the time on my records. But just hearing this version the other day, I was like, oh, this is a nice, velvety, luxurious version of Nature Boy. And we might as well play a little bit of the Coltrane just to give us that extra layer of depth. But like I said, it's important to never underestimate the point of melody. Melody is the essence of songwriting. And that forward movement of notes, chords, scales, that's what our brain is intrinsically invested in. And that's what's missing in so much modern music today, is anything beyond 4 bars of music. So the next chord, the next part of the progression, it's not there. And oftentimes even the choruses of these songs, it's the same loop. They just change the cadence or the rhythm of the chorus, or they're repeating a chorus. There's not musical structure to it. And so you already feel kind of the deconstruction here on some level with McCoy Tyner, Elvin Jones. And I mean, this is Coltrane right around just after Love Supreme. So it's a wonderful period before he kind of goes off the tracks, as it were, and really starts going really far out into the stratosphere. Great sessions. I think Bobby Thiel is leading most of these sessions. And Bobby Thiel was actually instrumental at a small label. I just saw it yesterday looking at that site. I was like, oh, Bobby Thiele started off there. And I think I heard it before, but I'd forgotten. So anyway, it's a wonderful patchwork quilt, this jazz story. And it's cool that on this channel, we could have the dialogue and the conversation about Charlie Mariano's and Lawrence Brown's and Al Gray's and so many of the people that made this music happen. And that I can have people respond and say, oh, I love Charlie Mariano. Oh, I love Stan Getz. And so it's a luxury. You know, I had a guy come in yesterday who knew some of those Stan Kenton, Woody Herman guys. And he said it was exciting to hear someone else mention those players' names. And I feel the same way when I find that person. I can talk beyond, oh, I like jazz. Oh, I don't really have any, but I like it. Which tends to be where most people who like jazz live. They might stream it once in a while or put on some easy listening jazz in their home. But to actually know jazz and the history and the story and the conflicts, it's a different context. And I'm just proud of this channel. I'm proud of this community. I'm proud of all of you guys. I'm proud of myself. For us to have such a broad canon and a broad dictionary and vocabulary of artists, labels, and players, because all that's part of the story. And it's Bobby Darin, it's the Miles Davis Mingus, it's the John Coltrane. It starts to put all of that sinew together. And when a Coltrane does a version of a song like Nature Boy, it's because he knows most people at that time were going to know that melody. And that's what's missing today a lot, is the audiences don't know these songs anymore. And they're only hearing the deconstructed jazz versions. Or sometimes, I mean, Parker does some wonderful, almost verbatim versions of some songs, you know. They don't have to be deconstructed. Coltrane's deconstructed the melody here, of course. But it's great stuff. So Nature Boy, get the Bobby Darin. You won't regret it. Ooh la la la, it's so beautiful. I live in that headspace. Played it on a lot of gigs. And like I said, once you hear that and get to know that, all the versions of that song you hear from that point forward will have a different context. I appreciate you all. We're going to leave it at that for today. We're going to try to squeeze little episodes into my openings in these time frames and just keep putting this channel out there for people to learn and to share. And for myself, I'm constantly learning as well. That's the thing I think people don't understand, is I'm not static. And even though these last few months I was really occupied, learning is a big part of what I enjoy. I love keep broadening my horizons. We'll talk to you all soon. Have a great day. Peace.